Today's guest is Micah Walje. He's the co-founder of Contractors, Closers, and Connections of Kansas City. Micah, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, no problem. Appreciate you having me.
Perfect. Always like to talk to people that build out sort of relationship networking groups and in construction. Great two topics. Have you when wh- how did you get into the construction industry?
So my father's actually a 48-year carpenter. He still works in the industry in the residential sector. So I grew up helping him on the job site in the summer, just doing, generalist stuff and laboring. And it's funny, I remember when I was 11 years old in the summer, we were working on a house out in the country, and these three people came up to talk to Dad about building a house potentially. And I was back at the house running a 12-inch chop saw. I was 11. I was cutting soffit and I didn't think anything of it. It's just the way I was raised. And the individuals walked back and they came up to me and they're like, "Is the boss here?" And now I realize looking back that it probably looked odd for an 11-year-old kid to be running a big saw by himself. But it's just the way I was raised. Like I
Yeah.
always worked.
Yeah, and early on you had some other entrepreneurial ventures.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of standard small town Midwest. I mowed yards. I trimmed Christmas trees by hand one summer with a guy, hauled hay, did construction work, hardscape construction, landscape construction. So yeah, I've always kind of had an entrepreneurial bug, but don't necessarily want to work for myself. So I'm more of an entrepreneur.
Okay, okay.
Maybe when I retire, I'll go to doing the small business thing, but not
So,
at this time.
and for you, like, how do you define an entrepreneur?
Someone that is passionate about what they do, but they take ownership in the company and their role from the standpoint of forward thinking, thinking on their feet, and helping grow and expand the company within the parameters of the company's goals and trajectory, like within what their operational capabilities are and goals and focus. So it's more of thinking outside of the box and being forward thinking, but also doing what the company's goals are, if that makes
Sure,
sense.
sure. In terms of fit, the right person, what in your mind, like, what's the right fit for someone, their temperament or whatnot, to be an entrepreneur versus an entrepreneur?
Hmm. I think there's a good and bad. So I feel like some people that, especially in like the residential construction space, the construction space in general, sometimes they are self-employed because there's personality conflicts, or they think they want to work for themselves, or they don't have the discipline to do certain items, and so they end up being self-employed. Or it's just somebody that really, really is passionate about working for themselves and willing to actually spend more time to have the freedom to do things on their own agenda as a business owner. As far as an entrepreneur, I, I I don't know if I necessarily have a direct answer to your question.
Yeah,
Somebody that's entrepreneurial but doesn't want the headache of and risk of running a business, essentially, whether
yeah.
that's based on their personal situation, um, their preference, their lifestyle, their work-life balance preferences. That could be a big determining factor,
Yeah.
obviously, on whether they do or don't actually want to run a business.
Yeah, you mentioned risk and some ability to shut it off.
Yeah. So I mean, I have trouble with that, and I don't own the business by any means. I'm one of like 130 employees. So I
Yeah.
think that's, if you're passionate about your work, I think that's pretty common.
Yeah, I know, and it just kind of and you started a group, right? I guess sort of contractors, closers, and connections. What is that?
So the goal behind that is it's 70 to 80% commercial real estate (CRE) and 20 to 30% AEC, architecture, engineering, construction. And so the goal behind it is to bring all the stakeholders in the commercial real estate and development arena and built environment into one setting to where they can collaborate, connect, potentially do business, and foster relationships. And I just started the Kansas City chapter. The original founder started the Atlanta chapter, I think 4 or 5 years ago. So I helped run the Kansas City one with two partners. We started the one in Northwest Arkansas with a local team, and then we just let them take it over. And then we donate, each chapter donates a portion of the proceeds to a non for profit. Some of the chapters, such as the Dallas chapter, is a full blown 501(c)(3).
Yeah, for sure. And what sort of activities or things uh, sort of happen in and around that
So the
events?
events are a combination of empowerment, education, and entertainment. So it's pretty common that you'll have some kind of a speaker panel or industry panel that gives you some insight, whether that's, like again, it's a heavy commercial real estate focus, but it could be, you know, design, build, assist, architecture, how to structure a deal, financing, the state of a particular sector within commercial real estate. Maybe that's industrial, infrastructure, multifamily, the whole gamut of everything within real estate development, essentially. And then there's it's more of a fun environment. So you might have uh, fire dancers, stilt walkers, live music, a musician. I mean, we really try to make the events fun, and they're always different at every chapter, pretty much. So you really never know what you're going to get when you go to an event, other than following the marketing for it. So from the creative side of me, excuse me, it's fun because I get to just take it and come up with a creative event that's fun and people enjoy. That's really really good AEC and CRE centric networking. But I get to create however I want to create the event, so it's kind of fun.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And when you have different groups with different motivations all together, are there any written or unwritten etiquette or rules around interactions?
Not per se. I mean, we're pretty specific on trying to make it focused on individuals in the two industries, the CRE and AEC industry. We encourage people to wear business attire or summer cocktail attire. And then, obviously, with any networking organization, we're not just throwing business cards at each other. It's a long term relationship based approach to building your book of business within the industry you work in.
Got it. Not a bunch of sales pitches, relationship, get to know people, have fun, stuff like that.
But we also, at the same time, you're not discouraged. I feel like it's almost the opposite now on the networking spectrum. It's like, oh, you don't talk about wanting to do business together. Like, your fiduciary responsibility as an employee to go out into a networking meeting is to build a book of business. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's this weird, unwritten like taboo. So something people have said to us is they appreciate the fact people are talking about and potentially doing deals together. So, but yes, it is a relationship based focus. But no, we don't discourage people from, you want to, you know, look over a pro forma on a deal while you're there. Great. That's why we're there.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, when I guess when you got this group going in this region, what did you learn?
What did I learn? Well, I'm basically a professional networker with a construction background. So I don't know if I necessarily learned anything about networking per se. I'd say it's improved my focus on my networking efforts, and then has built my book of business and contacts in other markets like significantly faster than I would if I wasn't involved in the organization. Because I've been to 5 other chapters around the country and their events. Um, that doesn't directly answer your question. So I don't. It depends on the context of what you mean. What I learned. You have something
Yeah.
specific?
No, no, I think you've touched on it, but you brought up something interesting is professional networking. No, everyone, a lot of people say they do networking, but in your mind, what's the difference between someone that's a professional networker and someone that kind of dabbles in it or kind of knows what they're doing?
So networking in our space, based on the size of the dollar value of the ticket, if you will, it's still relationship based. So the analogy I use right now is, regardless of how crazy technology gets, because we know it's changing at a rapid pace, unless you're a huge REIT, private equity firm, or conglomerate that has a board that works on your behalf, or you have a confidant or somebody that makes decisions for you, it's very, very unlikely that you're going to cut a check for 5, 10, 50, $100 million unless you meet the person. And I would think the majority of society would agree with that. They're not going to give you a check for millions of dollars until they meet you in person. So online presence and marketing and digital marketing is great, but it's still, there's still that personal face-to-face interaction that people appreciate. So to go with your question, networking for me is more of, I actually like to refer out as much work as I potentially receive or then some. So I connect people all the time out of habit, practice, and just out of enjoyment. Now I consciously and unconsciously realize I do it as a form of a way of giving back or helping someone. It's kind of my way to do that. I just have almost a weird sixth sense to, you should meet so and so based on the conversation. And then I'm actively listening, I'm present in the conversation, and you're talking about what you do, it just kind of naturally comes to me based on having a very large network now. Oh, this person would be a good contact for you. You guys work with the same customer, but you don't compete. Or you all are both general contractors, but you pursue a different project type. So you'd still be good strategic partners. So it's really putting together people, um, making a connection for them that helps them build their book of business and pipeline, which in turn gets your name out there organically and builds your personal brand within your industry and space.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, for networking or people that go to events, referrals are great, and being top of mind with someone like yourself is a great thing. Like, who do you, oh, sort of, in terms of becoming a person that becomes referable or top of mind? I mean, what sort of best practices do you have? Is someone that explains what they do well, they're personable, they're memorable, maybe they follow up. Like, what sort of things make someone more referable?
Last thing you said, I was thinking about that today. How many people say, I'll follow up with you, or they say they're going to email you or contact you, and they never do? It's so basic, but so undervalued that if you do actually follow up consistently, you've automatically set yourself apart on a very, very simple task, actually doing what you say you're going to do, which we all know and say. But the amount of people that don't follow up, it's their own fault. It's just human nature.
Yeah,
So that's huge.
yeah,
Um, I think having a good understanding of your industry from one aspect to the other, having a deep understanding of the clients that you work with and how you can provide value to them and be a resource for them, and then being able to, elaborate on that in a non-pushy manner in a networking setting goes a long way. And then, a lot of it just depends on the organization you represent, right or wrong. If you're a really ethical, well respected and trusted person in your space, but you happen to unintentionally go work or associate with an organization that doesn't have a good reputation or does some things that aren't on the up and up, that is going to tarnish your reputation, even though that's not your intention. You're guilty by association. So you have to be very conscious of that and try to make sure that you are involved with an organization that you have faith and find value in and believe in what they do. Because if you don't believe in it, nobody else is going to. Whatever that hippy dippy voodoo is, as far as the energy, it's just something you can sense. And you can tell if somebody, is being authentic in what they're talking about and if they're passionate about what they're doing.
yeah. Very cool. So besides the events you do, how else you approach sales and business development?
So I don't really consider what I do sales per se because we close or get a contract signed as a team. I'm more of a hunter, if you will, and finding the opportunities. So it's knowing the right daily consistent tasks that bring in opportunities to the company, following the processes I've created and been trained on, and then doing my best, which is always a living process, figuring out what makes sense for us to pursue. What projects do we want to pursue as a company? What capacity does our pre-construction team have to provide a budget or do a bid based on our backlog? What capabilities does our operational team and project management staff have to actually deliver on a project? What's the correct start time frame? Do we have trade partners in that area? What is our value prop against our competitors that we know we're potentially competing against? It's having a good understanding of your company, your role, your pursuits, and then being able to actually talk about it at least at a high level, even if you don't have a construction background.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's not as much in the AEC industry because you'll see a lot of, say, previous or registered architecture engineers that also work in business development, or someone like me who's a general contractor. But if you don't get to know your industry to some extent, if you don't have a background in it, you're not going to do as well as someone that has a technical background, even if you're maybe more outgoing and attractive, charismatic, whatever. People have a trust in somebody that has the background that can actually talk about what they do. It's just like, I guess, a simple analogy I heard a while back that's a good one is, just because they're my friend doesn't mean I'm going to do business with them.
Got it.
Obviously, you want to build a rapport, you want to be likable, and you want to build a connection with your client. But how many of us have friends or family members that are like, I would never actually do business with them or give them money? It's no different. So you have to get well at your good enough at your craft and a good enough understanding of it that you can provide value, and that your customers or potential customers actually trust you. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So can they solve my problem or will they create a problem for me?
Yeah. Or it's like, well, they don't know anything about my needs. They're just wasting my time, you know. So the people that we work with are looking at the numbers, they're doing underwriting, they're looking at huge deals. Their time's very valuable. So you need to be able to, talk about the items that they want to discuss because they went out of their way to speak with you as a potential service provider.
Yeah, for sure. So if someone doesn't have the knowledge, what are the strategies to acquire that knowledge?
So not everybody has the ability to do this. So my background is in finish work, tenant improvement work, and then rebuilding properties after fires, waters, natural disasters. Something that I was given the opportunity or autonomy to do, which I asked to do, is I go on the job site with a senior and superintendent twice a month, and I literally play labor or assistant superintendent, and I just sponge up everything I can from him, and I pick his brain. So when I did restoration, rebuilds or reconstruction, as they call it in that space, which is still construction, it's just pretty niche specific. When if I did have a window of time, I might go down with the crew doing the cleaning on all the items that have been affected by a fire, and I would stand at the fire line that they call it, if you will, and I would get involved hands on in the process to figure out how they restored and cleaned the items or the contents that went back into space. So I get involved in the process. So it's it's easier said than done, depending on the organizational structure and what they allow you to do. Because some places would say, "Oh, that's not your lane," or "We don't want you to do that," or whatever. You know, we all have tons of information at our tips and on our phone. I guess if you can't do that to some extent, you need to go and YouTube University's got a lot of information. So,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
if you can get in some kind of a cross functional capacity, you know, if you can't get a seat at the table, they say serve water. Figure out a way that you can do something that costs you your time, but builds your knowledge base. Because
Yeah,
I learned so much from walking around with that superintendent the days I'm on site because I don't have a background at doing large projects out of the ground. So I get to just walk around and I just pick his brain. I told him, I said, hopefully I don't drive you nuts asking you a million questions, but that makes me a lot better at my job. And it makes me have a better understanding of the pitfalls or gaps that potentially can cause a loss of money or a gap in a proposal when a customer is pricing out something to underwrite a deal.
yeah, for sure. Now, what are some other examples of, you don't have a seat at the table, but you're going to serve water. What have you seen other people do that may fit with other people's situation?
It's a hard question.
I like that saying though. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I actually heard that from a business influencer, so I can't take credit for it. Um, trying to think. I would say if you have a window of time, and as long as it doesn't come across like you're not being productive, I would go to my leadership or direct report and say, "Hey, I want to learn more about X, Y, and Z function within the company. Can I either take a class on it? Can I go work with them a couple hours a day, once a month, once a week, whatever it is? Can I potentially work with them, as a mentee, and tell them you want to learn that so that it makes you better at your role?" Um, if you have time in the evenings or the weekends and there's some way you can get involved in that, which that's definitely easier said than done, depending on your personal situation. But I've even thought about, earlier in my career, I would still do it now. Can I take half a day on a Saturday and go work with somebody doing a trade? I don't know. Maybe. Um, can I go grab coffee or lunch with someone that knows the things I know or want to learn that I don't and buy them lunch or dinner for their time? You just got to be, I guess that's where you go to the entrepreneur. That's where you're getting gritty and thinking outside of the box. And that's where the entrepreneur comes in. So, like, what can I do to give myself a strategic advantage and improve my knowledge base to make me better at my job and be of more value to my company and my role and my career long term because I'm improving my skill set and my knowledge base.
Yeah, for sure. You just talked about thinking outside the box. What are some other stories or examples you heard of other people, thinking outside the box for various reasons to get a result they're looking for?
The result in is that just
It
broad
could be
context
sales,
of
it could be anything, like what's something where another person looked at that and said that there's no opportunity there, walk away. And another person, started to think outside the box and they said, aha, maybe there's something here.
so something we do, and I guess I'm giving a card off our deck, but that's fine. I'm pretty open about stuff. We go out of our way to put our clients together with all the resources and stakeholders they need to get a deal done. So if I know you're looking for, what's an example? I would consider a real estate broker a COI or a circle of influence. They're not necessarily a customer, but they work with the same customers and they can refer you work. So, with that being said, to me, it's obvious anytime I know somebody that's looking for a particular type of space and I know such and such broker, that's what they specialize in to stay top of mind to them, as opposed to just saying, hey, how are you doing? I want to connect them with potential clients all I can, and that goes the same thing with architects, engineers, civil engineers. But basically, if you know a developer that you potentially work for and they're trying to get a deal done and they need help with the capital stack or the debt and equity, and we've got a whole list of capital partners that we will connect and refer them to. They're looking for, a large piece of land to do a build for rent project, and we come across the land. So it's connecting the dots, and that goes back to networking to help them put the deal together, just with the slight hope that that you can bid and potentially get to do the project.
Sure.
Some people are not like impulsivity. Somebody's going to say from outside looking to say, man, that's a lot of work just to potentially get the work. That's correct. The tickets are 30 to $100 million usually. So yeah,
Yeah.
you don't get those opportunities are a lot of work. They're a lot of money. That's why they're a lot of work.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, obviously you're just going around um understanding what people's motivations are and helping make their job easier.
Yeah, I mean, you're going out of your way to be, an advocate for them without getting paid to do so and becoming a resource so you stay top of mind.
Yeah, that makes sense. Very cool. I like it. Is there anything else with what you're doing, or what, let's say, what others come to you for expertise that you want to share that I didn't ask you?
I just consider myself an overeducated no bender, so I wouldn't give me too much credit. That's my that's sometimes it's my icebreaker line when people ask me what I do. No, I have a lot of people ask me on how to approach business development and build a book of business, and it's pretty surprising on how many companies don't have an established training or SOP or practice for their sales team. So I think the biggest disconnect I see at this point in my career are smaller to medium businesses. They want to get a business development team or they have one. They don't give them direction. And the rep, if they're a motivated person, they don't feel like they know what they're supposed to do or execute on. And then throughout the process, all parties get frustrated when it's really a failure on the leadership's part because they didn't let them, one, they don't know what they don't know, which is understandable. But before they hire or build a business development team, they need to know what they expect. They need to be crystal clear on the compensation plan when they hire those individuals. And then they also changing it year to year or all the time based on how it benefits the owner. That's a big one. I see that a lot, unfortunately. And they're like, well, I can't keep the big, good business development people. I'm like, you didn't give them clear expectations. You weren't crystal clear, transparent on how they're getting paid. And then when they did start delivering, you change their commission structure so they feel like they're counterintuitive with their efforts. So, and then if you don't know how to do it, reach out to somebody that does or hire some training for that individual and then come up with a marketing or business development plan that everybody within the organization agrees upon and makes sense and it's beneficial for everybody so that everybody can succeed. But if nobody knows what the expectations are, just like if you don't have a schedule on a project, they don't know what they're doing and they're not going to execute well. And then they're going to be frustrated because they don't really know what you want them to do. They're like, well, I don't really know what I'm supposed to do. They said, just go out there and find business and meet people. Like, it's kind of surprising how often you hear that. So again, if the organization or leadership doesn't know what they don't know, that's one thing, but they need to figure that out before they invest the time and money. And that's just as beneficial to them as the people they're hiring.